Agriculture remains the main pillar of Cameroon's economy, contributing to 70% of the gross domestic product and constituting 30% of exports revenue, according to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Blessed with fertile lands and available rainfall, the country produces a variety of food and cash crops for local consumption as well as exports. Government over the years has unveiled initiatives to boost the sector in what has been coined as the second generation agriculture. But on a general note, farmers in Cameroon still remain one of the poorest, depending on the state for subsidies as well as inputs, while the sector still remains unattractive to youths despite calls for them to join it. In this edition of the program, we shall be examining the factors behind the dysfunctional state of agriculture in Cameroon as well as Africa. And using a glaring example of resilience and vision, we shall explore how the tides can be turned positively. This is Hard Talk. Our guest tonight is a Cameroonian-born and US-trained technology and business development expert. He holds a Master's of Science in Technology Entrepreneurship from Northeastern University in the United States of America and has since been involved in the development and deployment of several techniques to boost agriculture in Cameroon. He is a serial entrepreneur and best known as the father of modern agriculture in Cameroon. A university lecturer, mentor and success coach, his ambitions and works are geared towards the establishment of platforms with sustainable business models to engage individuals and communities for win-win partnerships. He is founder and chief executive officer of Greenhouse Ventures and has since 2014 been a reference in transforming the face of agriculture in Cameroon. Join me to welcome ROLAND FOMUNDAM. ROLAND FOMUNDAM, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a big pleasure having you.
It's my pleasure as well.
Yeah. You are regarded in some quarters as the father of modern day agriculture. I would like to start on a personal note. You studied in the United States. What would make someone live the American dream to come to the soil in Cameroon?
When you get to the point to realize that the American dream is an illusion, then you would value home for everything that it has. For me personally, I have always been attracted to everything that is home. And a matter of fact, before I left Cameroon, I already had my hands, into the entrepreneurship world. To the point where going to the United States, a few years after living there, I realized that I could do a lot more back in Cameroon than I could do in the United States. I realized that what I could do in Cameroon could be more significant, be more recognized than what I could do in the United States. So it was more about where my value could be very much well recognized. And Cameroon, of course, it is home. It is my birthplace. It is where they will say your umbilical cord has been buried, and I believe that it is a place that I could make the most impact. So, of course, for me, I've always looked at Cameroon as a place I would build my legacy. And, of course, I had to be back.
Yeah, but one intriguing thing about you is you invested in a sector which might sound unlikely to the youths. Why the agricultural sector?
Interestingly, when I was done with school, I mean, even prior to that, I made the decision to move back home. But that decision even brought more questions to me than I had answers. And the question was, why going home? What to do at home? I realized that, well, I wasn't going home to become an employee. I could go and best become an employer. But again, what kind of employer and in what sector? As an entrepreneur, we look at where the problem lies the most, and we look at what could be the most significant solution. For me, I never meant to come back home and hope that a bed of roses, milk and honey will be prepared for me. It was looking at where the problem is more significant and where we could develop those solutions that could be critical, especially for development. And agriculture was that one place, because every person in my field, every friend that I had, every family member, nobody looked at agriculture. As a matter of fact, my generation, there was no one who aspired that they want to come back and do agriculture.
And do agriculture.
Exactly. Most of us who went to the United States or anywhere else, you know, either become a lawyer, a pharmacist, a doctor, a nurse, an engineer, an astronaut. Never would anybody say they want to become an agriculturalist. So I have always been that person looking at where no one is looking at. And I realized that agriculture was an area that no one was paying attention to, which meant that there were more opportunities that were so untapped. And of course, we now had to look at what could we do in that sector, what impact could I have, and what role could I play. So my background, of course, is in technology development and technology entrepreneurship, which means we look at, I'm well trained to develop businesses around several technologies. Early on, when we started learning about what is it that could be done in the agricultural sector to ameliorate it, make it more attractive, we realized that it was missing a technology. Because if you look at the agricultural landscape in Africa as a whole, they are missing sustainable technologies. Forget about the tractors, forget about those big machineries. Think of what are the small technologies that could be applicable in this field that could be applied to almost everybody. Now we realize that that was missing in the sector. So as a technology developmentalist, I had to find out, okay, what are the technologies that we could start to develop in this sector that could make it more attractive, more profitable, and more productive. So in 2006, the first idea I came up with was a solar dehydrator. We started working on, and at the time we were looking at the issue of perishability. It was a big problem at the time. Then from food dehydration, we went to mechanical water pumps. We went into green charcoal. We went to corn deshellers. But then we had a bigger problem. We realized that the technologies that we're developing to sell in the rural areas could not be afforded by those in these areas.
In these areas.
Yes. So we had to now find out what can we do to empower these rural dwellers economically so they can actually afford our technologies. There were two things. It was either we depended on subsidies from the government or from grants from well-wishers. But we realized that none of those methods are sustainable. So we had to now look at other countries. If you look at Israel, you look at Holland, you look at the United States, China, what is it that all other countries have done to be able to surpass that aspect of food insecurity? The greenhouse technology lies at the core of that. I mean, the greenhouse is that technology that could actually, in every way, increase food production, increase the quality, and increase the availability of food to almost everyone.
All right, for the layman, what is the greenhouse technology?
I like how you use the word for the layman.
Sure.
To break it in simple terms, the philosophy around the greenhouse is simply this. If you treat plants the same way you would treat humans, they would produce as much as you need there to be. That's the first philosophy around the greenhouse. So think about the fact that you and I will wear clothes, you and I we would stay in the house, we will put on the fan when it is hot, we'll put on the AC when it is hot, things like that. Because all we want to do is to adapt to a more suitable environment to which we can live better, correct?
Yeah, sure.
And that's the whole thing about the greenhouse. The greenhouse is plastic or glass structure. They used to call them glass houses that we grow crops under. And what it does is that it shields the crops from the external environment. So it protects crops now from the insects, from the rain, from thunder, from people going about pushing plants, from every mechanical and maybe weather aspects.
And even human factors.
And even human factors, a lot of that. I mean, if you look at now that is a rainy season, when it rains and the winds are so high, a lot of people lose crops.
Yeah.
But crops within the greenhouse are well protected. So the greenhouse is simply a structure that we put up in place to give plants a perfect and optimal environment so they can grow at the very best. And every crop has a science behind it. Every crop requires a particular temperature that it can live. They require a particular amount of water. Every aspect, just like we humans, we do. So if you've studied this about crops, then you can now realize, okay, I can put crops in this particular environment and they can do better. Look at a place like Israel. It used to be all a desert. It's still a desert. But they grow more food than many African countries all combined. Yeah. So how about that? So all they've been able to do is to understand, okay, if tomatoes grow at this particular temperature, at this humidity, let's give them that and see how they grow. That's the same thing that countries like Holland, countries like Kenya, many other countries that are applying the greenhouse technology are doing. So in a nutshell, a greenhouse technology is It's a metallic, no, it's a plastic or glass structure that gives plants the optimum environment so they can grow at their very, very best.
What edge does this technology has over maybe the poor farmers somewhere in Bisongaba in Manu division that just gets up in the morning with a cutlass and hoe and goes and clears the farm and plants it?
Interesting. First of all, I like to differ from the fact that we say the poor farmer, because we have given that connotation to farmers and they have made them to assume the fact that they are always poor.
Yeah.
You see, when a kid is growing up and you keep insulting that kid that you have a big head, you have a big head, you have a big head, they grow up believing that they have a big head.
That has a big head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have technically done to farmers, saying that they are poor, they are poor, they are poor. Even the richest farmer still believes that they are poor. Even the richest farmer still acts as though they are poor. They still want to wear their ragged clothes, they still want to wear sleepers just so they can act and look as though they are poor. But they're really not. Imagine that in a place like the United States, only 2% of farmers, only 2% of the entire population are farmers. But they are able to feed the entire United States. We're talking about 350 million people. But think about Cameroon. We have 70% that are farmers. But farmers still go to bed hungry. If there is somebody you find at the hospital that has malnutrition, is a farmer. It's such an oxymoron. So first of all, we have to change that definition or that connotation around farmers that they are poor.
Yeah.
That's one. The second aspect is within the greenhouse technology, the farmer gets to make a lot more. And it is all about the cost and the benefit. Because we've always made the farmer believe that they are poor, they have to depend on subsidies, they have to depend on grants, they have to depend on everything from everybody. The farmer doesn't see themselves as that person that can do any investment into something that could be more profitable to them. But I will tell you this. Within a greenhouse structure that will measure, say, about 8 meters by 15 meters, that's about 120 square meters, correct?
Yeah, sure.
That greenhouse can take about 300 tomato plants within a greenhouse, and each tomato plant can give you about 20 kilograms each per plant. You get me?
Yeah.
Now you're talking at least 2.5 tons of tomatoes from that little space. It is something that sounds unbelievable until you visit one of our farms. And that's what most people are beginning to find out. These are things that we never used to believe when we were younger. We used to say, oh, it's a white man that is making magic. No, there are just simple techniques that we've seen happen over time. So for me, what I'm getting to is the fact that when the farmer invests the right investment, they will rip off from the right investments. It's as simple as that. So the farmer who is in Bisongaba, whether it's in Bengui, whether it's in Oyumojok, whether it's in Upper Mayemen, wherever that farmer could be, whether it's in Marowa, if they can apply the right technologies in place, the right investments in place, the right agricultural techniques, then believe me, they would make the returns like any other farmer, even like the farmer you would have in the United States. Now,
how difficult was it for maybe the people around you and the government in particular to accept this technology? Have you proposed it to the government? What has been the response?
To your question again, I look at the government in two ways. There is the administrative government and there is a civilian government.
Yeah, the administrative government.
Good.
Yeah.
The administrative government, I will tell you a little story. In 2014, when the minister visited Bamenda at the time, because we were based in Bamenda, and we did have a chance to introduce to them what we're doing, the minister at the time told me straight up that greenhouses do not work in Cameroon. And he told me that whenever I could have a greenhouse work in Douala, I should come to his office, and he would come down for a visit. Unfortunately, when we built the greenhouse in Douala, he was no more in power. And of course, he is with me on Facebook, and he followed on Facebook, but he just had a very sarcastic comment, which of course was funny, but that didn't stop us anyways. For us, of course, we have done many things to introduce what we're doing to the entire population, but we needed to do more to be able to prove to them that it works beyond reasonable doubt. Because many people will say, well, but you had to leave from America to come back and do this, we are not sure. Initially, when we started the work, I had a lot of foreign students who were coming with me. I had students from Holland, from China, from Japan, from the United States, who came, of course, as their own part of studying to work with us in developing the entire idea. And that was something they did for their own school credit. We worked, of course, with local students, partnerships, and all of that. We did very well with that. But, of course, many people thought that the idea was so far-fetched. It had to be ROLAND FOMUNDAM doing it, or it had to be ROLAND FOMUNDAM and some whites, or it had to be some whites coming, or this and that. We had to break a lot of that stigma because nobody had ever believed that that could actually happen. But over and over, we have been in business now for close to 6 years, over and over educating several people, building the technology for several persons. We've built greenhouses at orphanages. We've built them at several universities. We've built them at several prison yards. We've given them to several community groups. Our idea is that we want to have this greenhouse technology in every community in Cameroon so people can actually see and believe in the wonders of the greenhouse. I remember in Bangui, we had to actually build a greenhouse in front of the main council so people who were going back and forth could see it. But ironically, it was funny because when we were doing the construction of the greenhouse in front of the council, the people who were passing on the road never believed that it was anything, you know. They are my country people, right? Yeah. They never even believed that I was from the same village. So they were speaking the dialect and wondering, is that a goat house? Is that a pig fence? Is that a rabbit? Oh, the mayor is just doing a canteen. You see, that was just something that people, as inquisitive as they could be, they could come and ask and say, what is this? But no one really cared to ask until we built. And even when we built, they never really came. They would always come and peep through the keyhole to see what is going on. Yeah. Until when we were harvesting, that was when people now realized, wow, there were crops in this. Because we harvested and we gave a general donation to everybody in the entire village. That's when people started believing. Even when we started taking our products to market, they never believed it. Until they had to come and see where those products were coming from, taste of it, and we told them, hey, we have tomatoes that can last 20 days. They never believed it.
They never believed it.
Oh, no, they never believed it.
Because the lifespan, of course, is 1 week.
Of course, yeah. 1 week is even, 1 week, that's when you're talking of premium iron tomatoes. Yeah. Lifespan number of tomatoes is 3 days, and that's when they harvest them even green. So we have cucumbers that lasted 62 days, like 2 months. You see, and one thing about that is the fact that we grow things naturally. The chemicals that we tend to use today are the things that really denature our crops, and people just don't get that. Organic farming proves to be more profitable than inorganic farming. But of course, we are not being taught that in school. Of course, we are not being preached that because we have the companies that sell these chemical fertilizers promoting their own image, promoting the chemicals so that they can stay into business. So you realize that the issues around agriculture as a whole is systematic. It's not only personal. But of course, we continue to do very well to make sure that the least person, even the child growing up, understands that there is something as a greenhouse technology, and this is how it works. And our goal is to make sure that every village, every region, every city in the country will someday have a greenhouse. And people of those areas will someday believe that the greenhouse technology is truly the technology for new agriculture.
Now, Roland, as someone who is in the sector, you just mentioned that in Cameroon, despite the fact that many people are into agriculture, they don't reap the benefits compared to the United States, where less people are able to feed millions and millions of people. What exactly is the problem in Cameroon?
The problem lies in several disciplines. The major challenge that we have today is simply the fact that youths are not involved in agriculture. It's our biggest problem. When youths are not involved in agriculture, it has been allowed to our parents. Our parents, they're getting old. They don't have the same energy they had back then. The fact that they are not being exposed in the new technologies of today, they cannot adopt and adapt to these technologies. They cannot adopt to the new techniques of agriculture that we have today. So productivity is very, very well reduced. That is a major challenge. And because of that challenge, new technologies can actually not be incubated into agriculture today. So because of that simply, we are unable to produce for the populations that we have. Our population is growing at a rate of 5 times, but productivity is being reduced every year. You see, because the more we grow, the more lands we use. Yeah. But the fact is that the populations that are actually producing food cannot produce to meet up with that. And in Cameroon, for example, that has become the agricultural hub, the breadbasket of all the countries around us.
Yeah, Semak in particular.
Yes, there is a pressure that is coming in. And for example, you go to the market today, tomatoes cost 14,000 francs a basket. Whereas last month, it was they were begging you to even take them.
Yeah, sure.
You understand? And that's simply because with the fact that borders have been opened a little bit, those guys have flooded in, and they're buying everything now at exorbitant prices. So the typical Cameroonian who used to produce their own food cannot even consume their own food. So it is becoming a major challenge for us to be able to feed our own current population with the way agriculture is doing right now. There are so many agricultural training schools around. There are so many programs that seek to develop agriculturalists. There are so many institutions that are training young farmers. But what happens after their training? They all want to go into office. You hardly find a farmer or a student farmer who says, oh, I want to finish because I want to graduate from here because I want to own a 10-hectare farm or want to produce to feed this particular market. All of them, or I would say 95 and plus of them, are merely going to school to get degrees to enable them to write concours or to be able to get some programs that can enable them to travel abroad and something like that. It's very sad because I am a lecturer. I teach several students, and I always have a last section of my course where I tend to ask students, why are you into this program? Yeah. And you would find students who are into mechanical engineering, you ask them, why are you training to become an engineer? They say, oh, because my uncle is an engineer. Oh, because my neighbor said I should come to this school, it's a good school. Oh, because it's a Presbyterian, it's a Catholic school, and that's why I'm here.
So there's a mentality problem.
It's a big mentality. I was going to get to that. Our biggest challenge in the country is that of a mindset. We have a mindset that has been, I would say, infused in us, and it could be tricky to understand where it comes from. But if there's anything we have to do is to first of all work on challenging that mindset. And like I'd always say, that mindset could be challenged in two things. One, we have to unlearn a lot of the things that we have had to learn, and then relearn what we really need to learn.
Okay, in terms of the government's policy towards agriculture in the country, when you look at the system which government has put in place, maybe to guide farmers to ensure that that the sector is well boosted, what are some of the shortcomings which you have observed as someone who is coming from outside with something new?
Well, one of the major issues that I see, or major handicaps that I see going on, is the fact that those who decide on the agricultural policies are actually or have not been farmers.
They are not actors.
They are not actors. They know the theory of agriculture. They know the theory of farming. They can write books till they reach, any other place.
Sure.
But agriculture is not off the books. Agriculture is not in the classroom. It saddens me a lot that I have students who graduate from one of the most prestigious universities in the country with degrees in agronomy and all of that. But you put them in the farm and all they have to do is just BS. There is nothing much more they can tell you besides regurgitating some exercise or notes from exercise books that they have learned. Agriculture is on the field. Think about it. It's like a baby. There is no standard book how you can raise a child. You get me? Every child can be raised in your own way, in their own environment. And you have to be able to adapt whatever learning methods based on that environment that they live in. It's as simple as that. Same as crops. Cameroon has over 7 ecological zones. You have to be able to adapt a particular crop to the particular environment so as it grows. You cannot train somebody in Bamenda on how to grow tomatoes in Bamenda, and then they go to Maroa and try to replicate the same thing, and it happens. It doesn't happen that way. And that's what happens with the theoretical aspects of agriculture, because most of those who make the policies don't actually understand what is in the field. But it's not their problem. The problem also is that we who are on the field are also very busy. So sometimes to have to come and sit on the round table and discuss these policies takes time. We really don't have that time. But there's an issue of how do we make both ends do get to meet. For me, for example, I have gotten to a point where I am not so much of a fan attending conferences because it is the same thing that has been said, a lot of promises but very little action. Sometimes you have to alienate yourself to the politics so that you can actually have an effect. But again, we have gotten too busy to a point where we believe that there is more action that is needed sustainably rather than having to be on the conferences and making the talks. So I think that where that where the loophole exists is just being able to bring the actors so they can actually be part of setting up the standards. Policy making, things that affect us all in general.
Now, what is the ideal structure of second generational agriculture if you were to propose to the government? Because government has always said the aim is to ensure that second agriculture in Cameroon becomes a reality, and the mentality is always about using machines. Is it all about machines, or is there something beyond machines?
It has very little to do with machines. And that's something that we need to look at very keenly, because you remember there was a time when people believed that sustainable or profitable agriculture had to do with buying tractors or owning a tractor. We have them packed somewhere in the south, right?
Yes.
And they're right there. It doesn't mean that it's not everyone that can operate a tractor. And it's not even one who has the sustainability to be able to afford or to maintain a tractor. As a matter of fact, not every farmer actually requires a tractor. If we can move away from that, we look at the fact that we humans are the machinery that is needed. Our mentality is supposedly supposed to be the machines that we do need to make it happen. So second generation agriculture, it's a mindset agriculture. That's how I look at it. It is agriculture of the mind. It is agriculture that makes people believe that their one seed that they plant today, if they take care of it, it can give them X amount of produce, which they can sell for Y price, and they can have Z gains. It is very important. So my idea to push for second generation agriculture, it's to the youths. Second generation agriculture belongs to the youths. It is for the youths. Whatever we need to do to get the youths involved in farming, in agriculture, that is the key. It is not about setting up training institutions so that they can be trained for that. No. As a matter of fact, and I will throw this in, 2 years ago, the African Development Bank published a program called the Enable Youth Program. That program was to bring about 1,000 plus, agri-entrepreneurs, as I said, promise them huge sums of funding, once they were done with the training program. I had a lot of those youths come into our sites for training. Of course, I took value because I have relationships with the African Development Bank. But then, when that cohort was done, they were not being placed. They never received the funding that they were being promised. You're talking about 1,000 plus students who were out there, who already had made their lives. A lot of them had forgone other things that they had in mind to come into this. Then the second year again, it happened, they launched it again. When the first year students were out there just laying out dormant. So how do you reconcile that? Now you have 2 years in a row, students who had left everything that they were doing to come into this, with all the promises that they had, nothing even happened. Now how do you think you would encourage the third year to still come and be a part of that? Yeah. How do you think people like us can say that, oh, agriculture today is for the youth, when the main system that is in place doesn't see how they could scaffold these youths to make them successful agri-entrepreneurs? So for me, the key has to rely in how do we attract and how do we retain the youths. Attracting is one thing, and retaining them is another.
It's another.
Because all they've been doing is actually attracting them. But there's nothing that has been done to retain the youth. And as a matter of fact, there are so many programs right now, if you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, that seeks to onboard the youths. As a matter of fact, they've made us to submit proposals, projects here and there every now and then. They will be funding for this, they will be funding for that. But at the end of the day, you don't see that. I think this area of promising and not meeting up those obligations really, really kills the essence of what our head of state talks about second generation agriculture. And unless they can bridge that gap, we would not be able to go anywhere.
Now, Roland, one other difficulty farmers face is getting their products to the market, particularly the Cameroonian market. At the time when we are being told to consume what we produce, we still find that many people prefer what is imported compared to what is being produced. How do farmers step up their game to ensure that they win over the market?
The main reason why people would buy imported produce has to do with the consistency of the availability of that particular product and the value of it. And those are the two things that our farmers are not paying particular attention to. If your products are not consistent, or if you're not a consistent farmer, then you lose that market. If your products don't have value consistently, then you lose that market. That's why people would prefer to go import tomatoes and come and sell. I get sick to my stomach when you walk into a supermarket and you find tomatoes and then said imported from France, imported from Mexico, imported from Morocco. Cameroon is the second largest producer of tomatoes in sub-Saharan Africa. How on earth do we still import tomatoes? When 90% of the farmers who are in Cameroon are able to produce tomatoes, how do we import? How come we still import them and actually supposed to go in and have to buy them? That is the problem. And I don't only want to base myself about talking the problems. I like to shift towards the solutions.
Towards the solutions.
And that's what we are doing. Today, we grow the things that are normally being imported using the greenhouse technology. We can grow almost anything. We can grow anything.
Including strawberries?
We grow strawberries. Right now, we have the largest greenhouse strawberry farm in West and Central Africa. You get me?
Yeah.
And strawberries, of course, people are very surprised that we are doing that.
Of course I am.
Yeah, but you remember that Limbe, in the 1960s, Limbe used to have strawberries. But we've moved away from a lot of these things. Boya had a particular variety of tomatoes. They call Boya tomatoes. We don't even have them anymore. These are tomatoes that can last you over 21 days on the shelf. A lot of things have happened, my brother, that has really taken away the valuable things we had and replaced them with the most invaluable things that we're dealing with today. So, of course, for the typical Cameroonian farmer to be able to compete with the foreign markets, they have to be able to do the investments that the foreign markets are able to do. Of course, there is nobody imports outdoor grown tomatoes from France and brings them here. They're all greenhouse grown tomatoes. So if you have to compete with that, build your own greenhouses and compete with that. If you want to be able to grow strawberries that are as sweet as those that they import, grow them in greenhouses. Because of course, strawberries, one thing put on, strawberries don't like the rain. The rain is acidic. The rain makes strawberries not as sweet as they have to be. So when you grow them outdoors and it rains on them, you don't have the very best of them. And that's why most of the strawberries that are being grown locally have a kind of a sour taste. But to have the real strawberries, they have to be sweet. Not that you have to put any saccharin on them, it's just the method that you grow them. And the secret lies behind the utilization of the greenhouse technology. So for us to be able to make the successes that other markets are making, we have to make those investments that they are making. And those investments are not, I always say that Cameroonian farmers, we are using 500-year-old technology to solve new age agricultural problems. It doesn't happen that way. If the West had advanced in using modern technologies, we here should be able to advance. We cannot keep telling ourselves that we are developing nations or we are under developed nations, so they should give us some time so we can catch up. No. We are able to do that. And the way we do that is, how can we replicate those existing solutions and adapt them to our own local environment? And that's what we have been able to do. We looked at the greenhouse technology as they have it in Holland, as they have it in Israel, and say, okay, what local materials do we have to be able to replicate that technology to give us the same result? 6 years counting, we've come up with the answer. And that's what we have going on right now.
Now, what difficulties do you have with the supermarkets? Because at a certain point, they might have been tempted to tell you that maybe you produce your things here, but we will not say name in Cameroon. Have you ever had that particular challenge? And how did you overcome it?
Well, those are some of the challenges that we've had to deal with. But as an entrepreneur and someone with an entrepreneurial mind, when you come across these issues, you find solutions, and those solutions give birth to, I would say, another revenue stream. So yes, of course, when we just moved, so we started production in Bamenda, which is my hometown. Of course, due to the crisis, we couldn't keep up with everything that we had to do there, because even the logistics of managing production was very well affected. We moved it into these other parts of the country. But then we didn't have the lands, we didn't have the resources that we needed to have. And of course, we didn't have the markets. At the time when we went to Bamenda, of course, our markets were those markets simply around us, and Nigeria, which was 3 hours away. Coming this way, we had to get new markets. But it was really a shock to us that most of the supermarkets at the time that we approached didn't want to house our products. Well, some said, oh, the Cameroonians are not ready for greenhouse-grown tomatoes. They're not ready for greenhouse-grown bell peppers. Many said, oh, if they have to take our products, we need to put
Change
our
the name.
brand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
put their
we need to
brand.
remove our brand and put their brand on it, like it was products grown in France. I mean, all those things. I took it to social media at one point, and some of my followers said, "Oh no, it's for money. Just sell it. You don't. It doesn't matter. Get your money." But that wasn't it for us. For us, we are looking to change the way things have been. We are looking to modify the mindset of the farmer. We are looking to introduce something that is a novelty, and because of that, we told ourselves that no, we would maintain our brand, we maintain our integrity, because what we are doing is a legacy. How did we overcome this situation? Interestingly, someday I visited one of these supermarkets, because what I started doing was visiting all these supermarkets, understanding the consumer habits. What do people buy? Who are the types of people who come to these markets? How do they buy? Do they buy in small, in large? What kind of products do they usually get? All of that. Because you have to understand your market very first before you get into any business. When I got to one of the supermarkets, there was a little girl who was standing at the entrance of the market and giving out some flyers. She belonged to a church. And I realized every person who came out would take a flyer from her, take a flyer. And I told myself, what am I sitting here and doing? So the following day, I came with a ribbon full of flyers, and that's what I did. Gave them out, gave them out, gave them out. And strike of luck, there was a particular lady who got one of my flyers, and then she called me back and told me she belongs to an association of professional women in Douala, and she could do very well in selling my produce. And that was how we went viral. We sent her our flyers, sent her our images. We have a group of over 400 women who've been ordering. And from every order that we had, there was a referral, and then we went into offices. We started to we realized that we could do a lot more when we delivered now to home clients. And the home clients, it was even more important because they gave us feedback. So they would tell us, oh, the bell peppers were this, they were that, or they had these issues with tomatoes. Everything that they told us, we're able to modify our cultivation methods to come up with a standard today that is a peak. So yes, up to a point where the supermarkets realized that there was some reduction in what they were getting, in what they could sell.
And they had now competition.
Yes,
yeah.
and of course we had a time when some people approached us and said, oh, we couldn't sell bell peppers at that price. Because bell peppers, if you know, they are very expensive.
Yeah.
They're very, very expensive. As a matter of fact, there are supermarkets that you would have bell peppers for close to 13,500 francs a kilogram. And we will sell for a third of that price. And it didn't make any sense for any competition. So we've been approached, and we simply responded that we grow locally and we sell for the local price. It makes no sense. As a matter of fact, it's against our own values, our own ethics, to grow locally and sell as though it is a foreign grown produce. And I think from there we're beginning to get more attention from them, and with more considerations, especially now that we've increased production capacity, to see how we could satisfy both clientele, those at home and those who buy from the supermarkets.
So you're encouraging the farmers to stick to themselves, stick to their identity, and beef up their game.
Well, that is one thing that farmers have to do, but first of all, you have to understand your market. The first thing every entrepreneur must do is the market. So there are three aspects whenever you have to start any business initiative. One, you have to understand what is the need in the marketplace. Yeah. Very important. The second, you have to understand who is the market, who you have to sell to, how much you are to sell. Understand all of those consumer habits. And then the third, before you even come to develop your product. So of course, for us, we have done all of that, and we are now able to grow produce for the different clienteles that we have. So we just don't grow tomatoes or strawberries or bell peppers or cabbages because we want to grow them. We understand what the market needs, we understand the market trends, and we now go into production. For example, in Bamenda, we were doing more of green beans, we're doing cabbages, we're doing tomatoes, we never even did strawberries at the time. You see, so, and then now we're doing like Of course, we're doing cauliflower, we're looking to do broccoli, looking to do spinach. These things that the market on this other side does require. So it really depends on what your market needs, and you grow for that. And of course, be very consistent and stick to the value of your produce.
Now, how can Cameroonian farmers take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is what the African Union is bent on, ensuring that we have a common market for our goods? How can Cameroonian farmers exploit it to, beef up their farms as well as their livelihood?
Well, it's a huge opportunity, especially if we get to understand how huge it is. The issue is most of us, most farmers, are uninformed. So when they are uninformed, they make very uninformed decisions. The first thing is they should seek information. They should go towards the right information, because that information is what will empower them towards making the realizations that they would have to make. The second aspect, with this continental trade, it is very important because now the borders are opening up. We've just realized the effect of that recently. Now that we have tomato prices at 14,000 a basket, it is simply because the borders kind of opened up.
Yeah.
And now the markets are flooded in to buy out. But if we had enough production, the prices would not fluctuate as much. I mean, it makes no sense that prices fluctuate 1,000 the previous month, and 30 days after it is 14,000. And by Christmas, it would get to about 25,000 francs. That's how it's going to be. And that would keep going up till about the month of March. So it is important that we begin to understand the trends that we do have, the seasonality, and then see how we match that with the demand from other places. Because the moment Nigeria comes into Cameroon to buy, the Cameroonian buyer has no power.
Sure.
Because the Nigerian will buy at the price that the Cameroonian will never buy. The moment Equatorial Guinea comes into Cameroon, the moment Gabon comes into Cameroon, the moment Congo or Chad, that's what happens. So for us to take advantage of that, first, we need to make sure that we are producing year-round. Because what affects supply is our fluctuations in seasons. And that's what the greenhouse technology could help to ameliorate. Because within the greenhouse, if we tell you that we're harvesting 100 kilograms every week, we're harvesting 100 kilograms for 52 weeks of a year.
All year round.
It doesn't matter if it is raining, if it's sunny, if there is thunder outside, whatever is going on, we are always harvesting. And if you can have that consistency in your harvest capacity, your market would always be there, and the prices will not have to fluctuate this much. As a matter of fact, we will be able to determine the prices that we want to sell. Because when supply is higher than demand, the supply determines the price.
Sure.
But when the demand is higher, the prices are different. So I think for us is, if farmers can get to a point where they can produce year-round without any interruption, or they could actually work out their terrain, because again, it doesn't mean that everybody should own a greenhouse, even though I would advocate for that to happen. But there are many ways that you can make that happen. If you go to a place like Santa, you realize that during the dry season, there is more planting that is done in the valleys, because there is water around it. And the rainy season, it goes more uphill. Or people could invest in having boreholes. Those are investments that are long-term. Once you have a borehole, you can actually have irrigation year-round. Because the issue about the dry season and the rainy season is just an aspect of irrigation. Irrigation is actually 50% of it. The other 25 and 50% that is left just has to do with infection from pests, from insects, and then, mechanical issues from people and animals and all of that. But irrigation is more than 50% of dry season farming.
Now, what do you have to say about the curriculum? I'm asking this question because we have so many agricultural schools in Cameroon, but yet you say that the students that are being sent out prefer to work in the offices. Is there a problem with the curriculum?
When we look at countries like China, in the 1990s, China was worse than we are today. But now China is a superpower, threatening even the first world countries, as they call them.
The US.
Yes. What have we learned, or what do we learn? It's very important. When you look at a country like Rwanda, which is next to us, not even to go too far, in the 90s, they were a torn-out country. Today, what is it that they are doing to make their country more sustainable? We have to learn from that. So that I shouldn't be speaking as though I'm speaking from the atmosphere. No. I think we have a mentality problem. We have this mindset that degrees is what matters. People have been sold to earning degrees in universities that, they've been misled in so many ways. To a point where a typical person going to school just cares about the degree they're to have than the skills they would acquire from that degree. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Degrees, and I would be very loud about that, make you a very, very good employee. That is not a problem. And of course, they're supposed to be employees and employers. But skill sets is what makes you a very creative person, a person who can adapt to almost everything that you have. The richest people in the world are not the most educated people, don't have the largest degrees. As a matter of fact, the richest people in the world have no degrees.
Yeah.
No one has ever introduced Dangote today and said he's the graduate from Ahmadu Bello University with a PhD in cement production, right? No one has ever introduced Bill Gates about his degree. Yeah. No one has ever introduced Mark Zuckerberg and said he owns a degree. None of that. No one has ever introduced Steve Jobs or even our Power Focam here, or Power Guarantee or TASA, or all these famous people that Power Photo, or Power Kaji. No one has ever introduced any of them and said they came from X university, they have X amount of degrees and this and that. None. But the generation we are having today is all caught up on, I want to have these degrees, I want to have this title, I want to be called Mr. Doctor, Professor, Engineer. You understand? I mean, it is, that's why I say it is a mindset issue. We have to drift away from that aspect to now start to realize, okay, what are the things that we must do to make sure that we don't fall victims to the things that others are fallen victims about. So yes, talking about the curriculum that we have in place, we need a curriculum that is geared towards an experiential approach. It means experiential is experimental. You have to be in the field. You don't train farmers in the classroom. I have a big problem with that because I wouldn't lie to you, I get a lot of them who come to us for jobs. And it's sad. I mean, you have students from, as a matter of fact, most of the employees I have working on the farms are those from the 2-year schools, the schools that are just 2 years. Those ones because they have 1 year that is practical and then the other year they have in classrooms. The other ones where they go to 4-year colleges and they have a degree in plant protection and all of that, it's a big problem. Because they have no understanding of anything. They're just being taught, okay, when you plant tomatoes, after 1 week you apply this fertilizer. When you see the leaves getting yellow, you apply this. When you see this, you go to the seed store, you go to the phytosanitary store and buy this and apply. That's all. They've been taught application. They're not been taught how to diagnose. They're not been taught how to understand the plant, how to communicate with the plant. Plants, like I say, are like animals. They are like humans. They can communicate. Plants can tell you when they're thirsty. Plants can tell you when their roots are sick, when their leaves are sick. They can tell you when they lack a particular nutrient in them. You have to be able to understand that. It is very important. And until you understand that, then you can understand what it takes to solve their problems. In Kenya, for example, they have a committee that they go around. So when you have a farm, you register your farm correctly. Then they have a committee that goes around every week to investigate every farm. And what happens is that you have like a consultant. It's like, like a diagnostics doctor. They go around and they check, the basic things that they have to check, the leaves, the roots, the stems, all of that to see if there's any issues. And they begin to propose solutions for that. So I believe that we need things like that. We need approaches that are more practical. We need students that can spend more time in the farm than in the classroom. As a matter of fact, I would prefer that they should reduce the time that any agricultural student has to spend in any school. 2 years is too much. The reason I talked about China was because when China had to lead this developmental wavelength, what they had to do, what they did at the time was they had to take down all their entire curriculum to a 6-month curriculum. Everything was 6 months. So all you had to do at the time was simply just going for a 6 months degree. And you went in for 6 months, you finished, you did the 6 months, and from there, you were back in the fields. And that's why China today has more people who are actually practitioners, who are actually field persons, they have a huge labor force. And that's what we do need today. We need more people who can understand the farms, manage the farms, than those who can sit in the office and say how we should be working in the farms.
Now, the Ministry of Secondary Education has decided to implement, to institute farming as one of the subjects starting this upcoming academic year. If you were part of the team conceiving the program for agriculture in secondary schools in Cameroon, what would be your ideal format?
The ideal format would be every school should have a farm. When we're growing up, we had farms at our schools, and those are the things that oriented some of us to be in the field that we are today. Every school should have a farm, and every farm should have a farm manager who is being treated the same way as the teacher in the classroom. It is very important. And the curriculum should be made in such a way that the students spend a certain amount of hours on the farm. When you study, I would say like in the United States, you study any field like engineering, we have what you call the capstone. The capstone is a part of your study that is more practical. You have to spend X amount of hours in the field developing a particular product. It is very, very important. So we would be looking at students who have a particular farm, who can manage a farm from start to finish, and who are able to sell the produce from that particular farm. Because the issue we're having today is the fact that most farmers are trained only to produce. They're not trained to sell. But if you cannot sell, then you cannot produce. It is very important.
And how to do business.
Yeah,
too.
how to do business. Yeah. It's as simple as that, because most people just believe that, okay, let me just grow tomatoes today and then go dump in Marché Sandaga because I see everybody selling tomatoes in Marché Sandaga. It doesn't happen that way. We need to be able to close up that gap by making sure that they don't only learn how to produce, they have to learn to sell it. It is very important, because today, the person who makes more money in the agricultural value chain is a démarcheur, is a middleman. Is a person who has nothing to do with farm. They just take from here and supply here. Somebody will buy a tomato from the western region for 100 francs and sells here for 1,000 francs. Yeah. But the farmer who spent 8 hours a day, 30 days a month, doesn't make any gain. So it's a very big problem. We need to be able to get a closed loop education system around the training of farmers.
Which means that entrepreneurship has to come in.
Exactly. Agri-entrepreneurship is a closed circle. We need to be able to train them from that entire value chain. And even beyond the marketing, the transformation of it, it is very, very important, because we forget a very big aspect, transformation. Cameroon, for example, is the second largest producer of tomatoes, but we have no processing factory. That's why we had to dump tomatoes last month on the marketplace. But factories don't mean that you have to have a humongous factory in place. We had a factory in Fumbot. Of course, it closed down for many, many reasons. But the investments that we're doing today, we could have another factory. It doesn't stop us from doing it. And there are even smaller factories that we can actually put in place. So I believe that we need to be able to start training people to see the full circle of product development, the full circle of the entire value chain of produce, for us to be able to make certain gains as we have to.
All right, this last question before we go. We find so many cooperatives. The farmers come together with the idea of having a good leverage when they sell their products, sharing ideas on how they can best have good practices in farming. For young people like you into the sector, what reforms do you think these cooperatives could have so that they could be more competitive and productive in the face of let's say the prevailing challenges, particularly COVID-19?
Well, the idea of cooperative formation, when it came into the country, it hit a very wrong note. Most people looked at cooperatives as a money-making machine, because when cooperatives were announced, there were funds that were supposed to be channeled with the creation of every cooperative. So as a matter of fact, they were very dummy cooperatives that were being created. Most people created cooperatives by just their family members, their friends, and all of that, just because they can go and submit that and get the funds that they have to be with it. So first of all, the idea behind it, most people got it very, very wrongly. But if we had to go on the right side of it, cooperatives is what has made countries like the United States succeed. Many countries that have succeeded in agriculture, if you go to Holland today, that has only 50,000 farmers, 55,000 farmers. Holland is a country of 17 million people. smaller than Cameroon.
Yeah.
And only 55,000 of the people of that population are actually farmers. You get me? So you're talking about a 1% of the population. But they are able to export more food than any country in Europe. They feed Europe. And it's the essence of cooperatives. The idea of cooperatives is that they come together, they share ideas, knowledge, and resource. So there are so many ideas that are going on out here today. If we could get together as a cooperative, and each one of us brings these ideas from whatever pool that we are coming from, and then bring this idea to a universal pool, and then we share the ideas. We share the markets. We decide market pricing. We decide on technologies to produce all of those things. Those are the things that could actually enable us to be able to succeed. It's one of the things that we are looking to do with Greenhouse Ventures. We are looking to we actually putting in place a cooperative that would give birth to so many individuals to own our technology, to produce and sell to our markets. Because we are looking to set up a market that would do just wholesale selling for all the markets, not only those in Cameroon, but those in the regional areas.
All right. Thank you very much, ROLAND FOMUNDAM.
Thank you again.
Yeah, it was a big pleasure having you, and we shall have you some other time.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. And to you, televiewers, it was a big pleasure having you on the program Hard Talk. Until next week, bye-bye.